Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Deadmen Plays. This is my first episode, and my name is Ken Johnson from DeadmenInc.com, and today we're going to be playing a little bit of Hyrule Warriors for the Wii U. Let's get started. Now, for those of you guys who have heard about this game, this is kind of built as a it's sort of a crossover between the Hyrule Warrior, the Hyrule games, the Legend of Zelda games, and the Dynasty Warriors franchise. And they have a lot of fun with that concept, I must say. I played a little bit of this game. We're just going to do a quick level here real quick. I just unlocked the character Midna, who I've not played as yet, but I'm really excited to see what all she can do. This game actually was given to me as a Christmas present from my roommate Travis, my co-host on Bon Voyage podcast. And I'm really excited about getting more into this game. This might end up just being kind of like my vlog game where I'll kind of, play a level or two of this and talk about the, just talk about various things in the game that interest me or that I think are worth pointing out. There's more. Actually, I would say this game is more going to be my game of... I say whatever's on my mind, stuff either going on with a site or things going on with me in general, because it might be fun to experiment with, just different ways that, you can mess with the Let's Play concept. Anyway, now that we're done unlocking our basic moves here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. So I know there's been a lot of criticism from people basically saying that this is just another Dynasty Warriors game. And although I haven't played Dynasty Warriors before, I have to say that the Zelda footprints are much more than just pure aesthetic in this thing. I haven't even gotten through the majority of this game yet, but I cannot tell you how excited I am to unlock more characters and get farther and farther. First off, I just want to point out this game is all kinds of pretty. My goodness, does this game look good. And I'm really excited to see, moving forward, what all this game is able to accomplish. I've seen some Midna gameplay before, but I haven't played with her as much in the past. Well, I must admit, it's kind of ironic, because I'm technically playing against Midna's army in this game right now, so that's kind of bizarre. But, yeah, as you can tell, most of the enemies in this game kind of just mow straight through them, but they are still very fun to play against all the same. We actually have the option with the smaller enemies to turn health bars on or off. This is my first time playing with them on. I might play them with them off from now on, just because I'm realizing just how many individual tiny little health bars you're really going to be dealing with. But the game is a lot of fun with the experimentation with combos, and it's obviously a lot more action focused than your average Zelda game, but you still have your a lot of the key things you've come to know and love. The Z targeting system, or a lot of the captains for levels, the outpost captains, are actually just heightened up version of like the Lysdalfos, or the the skeleton creatures from various games. And a lot of the music in this game is a lot more like rock and roll-ish, high stakes versions of your average Zelda themes, and you have a lot of fun with that as well. This game is it's a lot of fun. It's a lot more of a I'm not one of those people that necessarily say that this isn't a Zelda game. But at the same point, this kind of experimentation, I think, is really cool. In particular, comparison to, I'm a big fan of Bob Chipman's videos with the game Overthinker. And he recently did a video about Super Mario Bros. 2, talking about how video games today aren't as willing to change up the status quo and make entries that are just completely and totally different for the sake of being different. Now he uses Super Mario Brothers 2 as a comparison, partially because he does acknowledge, even so, that Super Mario Brothers 2 was technically a reskin of another game, even though Miyamoto did have quite a bit to do with it, even though there's still, obviously the real Super Mario Brothers 2 in Japan. But, like, actually thinking through that concept, I actually think that this game is actually a pretty good answer to that, saying that, modern games don't ever take big chances. You couldn't have a Super Mario Brothers 2 out today, but, I mean, Hyrule Warriors kind of is that. Sure, it is a reskin of another franchise, but like he compared with that video, he could have picked any franchise in the world to be, he could have picked any franchise that was even, more compatible with The Legend of Zelda or stuck more to its puzzle-solving roots in order to have its fun little experiment with the Legend of Zelda franchise. But instead, he picked, of all people, he picked a Dynasty Warriors franchise. This is, a game that basically stands for all this stupid, dumb, over-the-top, ridiculous action that, for the most part, people usually assume, or usually associate Legend of Zelda for being quote-unquote above, in a way. It's more stupid, dumb fun than the, the high art, crazy, out-of-control Legend of Zelda that we're used to. And I find that very fascinating, mainly because, I didn't see that comparison going into this. But, the more I think about it, yeah, this is actually, it's a bigger step in an interesting direction than people give it credit for. I will absolutely say. I think people just immediately assume that the only influence that Zelda really has in this game is the reskin. And I think that is completely not true. You can absolutely see, the influence of the multiple characters and the absolutely crazy fan service, which I feel even just these days the word fan service has kind of been given a bad name, but this is an example of how to do fan service correctly. And I absolutely think that as far as being able to take big chances, Nintendo has been taking big chances, and I could only imagine the amount of money that went into this game, with the amount of, incredibly high-tech graphics and being able to trust it. Like, I remember, the last time Nintendo trusted another company with one of their big franchises, like with Other M, and everyone kind of knows how that turned out. I mean, not the, the best from a critic's perspective, but from a financial perspective, it was good. But still, Dynasty Warriors Zelda, no one really saw this coming. And it just goes to show you that this is kind of, I don't want to necessarily use the cliche term of a new Nintendo, but I can absolutely see how people are excited about the idea of Nintendo taking more chances like this. I don't even know what other franchises they could pull from, or like what companies I would love to see get involved with Nintendo, but they've said that this is more along the path, that more stuff like this in general is coming. And like, even playing this much of it, I would love to play a Hyrule Warriors 2. I can tell you that right off the bat, that playing another game in this, what I'm hoping to be, franchise, I would absolutely love. Because there's, as much fan service they pay to this game, there's more levels and more places that they could homage within the Legend of Zelda universe. Or, there's never been a better time for Nintendo to, if they're going to give other companies these kind of projects, like actually, maybe taking some of their older projects out of the, out of storage. I think there's definitely some benefit that can be taken from Nintendo digging even farther into their back catalog. Not just for the HD remaster collections, because, those are nice and they really do a good job, but, like, there's other series that they haven't messed with in a long time that they could have a lot of fun with. I know that the Earthbound thing's been tossed around a lot, but maybe if Nintendo doesn't want to, like, maybe front it themselves, maybe they give it to, like, a Level 5 or another big RPG company. Because they've done work with those people before. They've done work with Squeenix before. They've done work with, all sorts of people. Even, they've supported Kingdom Hearts games by themselves. They, there's there's a lot of room for Nintendo to experiment a lot with what kind of new projects they could come up with, going off of the idea of taking other companies or lesser known IPs and trusting some of their free time and some of their free resources into that. Or, you know, the ways that they've been experimenting with new IPs, with Splatoon coming out next year, the Nintendo game that no one knew they wanted, but it's absolutely the game that everyone's looking forward to play. Nintendo is a lot better at this than people give them credit for. Even looking at the way that the whole amiibo thing happened. You know, it was just originally everyone saw it as this really, really stupid cash-in thing. And yet amiibos are taking off like wildfire. As you guys can hopefully tell, I'm a bit of a Nintendo fan myself. I do play other stuff, but when I first started this, though, I made absolutely sure that I was going to be able to play Nintendo. And I know that, you know, the whole AdSense thing with Nintendo copyrights and all that is kind of a big thing. And that's probably why I'm not monetizing these videos. At least that, for the most part, that's part of it. That and, you know, people have already said that AdSense is kind of busted anyway. So I'm kind of just going to do the Patreon thing. And, you know, I'm doing this more for fun anyways. But, you know, if people happen to really like what I do, then so be it. That being said, let's keep moving farther into this level. Sorry if it seems like I'm not talking much about this specific game this particular time around, but as you can tell, this is one of the more Twilight Princess-inspired levels. And once again, I cannot understate how beautiful this game looks. You know, it really bugs me the more and more people talk about it. It's like, oh, the Wii U is the watered-down console, and so on and so forth. But, like, it's games like this that really show that art style and aesthetics are so much more important than graphics. Sure, this is the most high-fidelity game you'll ever play, but you cannot say this game doesn't look pretty. You can't say this game doesn't look fantastic for what it is. And also, I really like the way that they do their storytelling in this one, and I think more 3D Zelda games could benefit from this, where we don't have voice acting still. And I'm fine with that in a Zelda game. But the idea that we still have fully cinematic styled cutscenes. The fact that we still have this ability to see the exact emotions, the moving of mouths, and all that kind of stuff from our various protagonists really helps sell the way this game is portrayed. Because, I mean, when you really think about it, like, it's not very often in Zelda games you get full cutscenes like that. In Ocarina of Time, they were separated few and far between, and were usually meant in completely separate sequences when stories were being told, or only when, like, big things with Ganon would happen. And even then, most of all those scenes were portrayed in wide shots, and very, very, very seldom got close up and in people's faces to actually see emotions or changing of actions. I mean, I know part of that is the fact that Link and the Zelda franchise are meant to more be characters you can kind of put yourself into, and it's a convention that Zelda probably isn't willing to let go. And I'm fine if they don't want to let that go, to be honest, but at the same point, you know, I think they could benefit from doing more games in this style, where they acknowledge that they aren't going to use actual voice acting, but they still shoot it with the same amount of finesse and the same amount of emotional closeness that you would get if they were voice acted. In fact, this ties into the other day. For those guys who are fans of Bon Voyage Podcast, also featured on this site, I'll leave a link to it below. But Bon Voyage Podcast is a roommate that I do. Is a podcast that I do with my roommate. That basically what we do is we do all sorts of different topics talking about different things. And our next one, we're doing a series talking about JRPGs. But in particular, on our last podcast, we did one talking about games that we would like to see remakes or reboots of. And a lot of that we talked about the Final Fantasy franchise and the way people have talked about whether or not a Final Fantasy VII True HD is ever going to happen. Which, for a million reasons we talked about in that podcast, it is not going to happen. But one of the main things I've debated with my roommate is how they would portray the HD remasters of their cutscenes, considering it's a little bit older even then than your average cutscene. than your average game cutscenes. And one thing that I think they could benefit from is if they were going to go through everything, and my roommate absolutely stands for the fact that they should not be voice acted. And I'm fine with that. I actually completely understand why he has that particular opinion. But at the same point, I think one really fun middle ground would be actually the idea that they do their cutscenes in the same way that Hyrule Warriors portrays their cutscenes, where we don't actually have actual voice acting, but we still have, like truly high-end 3D graphics, and we still find ourselves able to see all of the emotions of the characters and so on and so forth with their fine facial expressions and all that, and actually be able to block them with like more camera angles other than just being far away. Not that there's anything wrong with the way they're doing it, but they could do all of that without having to give up any of the silence that they'd like out of the games. And I just think that's something they should look into, maybe for a different game, if they were going to do it in a high def, only because for a million reasons we discussed in that podcast, like I said, I just don't think that for financial reasons that particular one is in the cards for them. It just doesn't make as much logical sense as some other ones do, only because so many people are currently just buying the normal version. The actual incentive for that purchase almost just isn't there, in a way. As little as that seems to make sense. But anyways, I can't think of another game off the top of my head that quite does cutscenes that way. I'm sure that there are plenty, but like, it's I've noticed that Nintendo has been trying to give more overall personality and more depth to the emotional spectrum of Legend of Zelda. That's one of the main things that split a lot of people on Skyward Sword, is that was one of for me personally, that was the main focus of that game, is actually being able to portray Link and Zelda not as just people assuming that they're together, but at least if they're going to be together. If you're going to make Legend of Zelda, make Zelda and Link romantically involved in a game, like actually make the chemistry work, like actually make them feel compatible. Like when you play the first hour or two of Skyward Sword, the gameplay can seem like it takes a little bit while to get to the hub world at times, but you compare that to the amount of emotional investment you have in these characters. Zelda no longer feels like this, this ethereal, pixie angel character that kind of just sitting around for you to save them. She sticks up for herself, and she actually takes responsibility. She feels in charge. Or the biggest thing is that even as a princess character, which most people, the whole princess thing puts a bad taste in your mouth, this is one of the very few Zeldas where I can actually see her becoming queen, which is kind of interesting. I mean, Hyrule Warriors is one of the other ones too, where you actually see her in a role where she's not only fighting with her own armies, she's like giving commands, and she's actually acting like true leading royalty. You don't see that in some of the other ones. Now, for Ocarina of Time, there's a little bit more of an excuse to that, because the majority of Zelda portrayed in that game is the kid version, and the adult version spends most of her time kidnapped. And I don't mind necessarily that she's kidnapped in that one, because it feels a little bit more natural. She does actually have a more important place in the story, and with the whole Sheik mechanic, she actually is able to fight for herself for so much of the story. Now, technically, I know some people get into debates with that, of like, oh, well, she just has to become a man before she's actually able to be considered a strong character, but I don't think that's the intention. It just gives off this feeling that I think the biggest thing to take away from it is this idea that Zelda / Sheik, she's not willing to just wait around for her story to happen. She wants to be part of the narrative. and it doesn't feel like a woman in the refrigerator mechanic when something bad ever happens to Zelda, or when you have to go off and save her. And if you actually look at the character of Zelda and assume that there are various transformations and her various identities throughout the game are in fact canon to her actual character, then, you know, look no farther than Wind Waker, where her character in that one, when she's actually playing the pirate captain, like, what a great female protagonist that they portray in that game. I mean, in general, I'm looking forward to playing the Wind Waker HD version very soon, just because I find the game is just oozes fun. You know, like, I do like the idea of Zelda taking a sense of humor about themselves a little bit more often. Maybe not all the time, but, you know, occasionally you need to lighten things up a little bit. And I think that's what Wind Waker was. Wind Waker was the enlightening, sense of humor-driven game that we needed after something depressing like Majora's Mask. And at the same point, I kind of feel the same way about Skyward Sword. Skyward Sword was the slightly more lighthearted takeaway, follow-up to the way that Twilight Princess was a little bit more on the darker side. In case any of you are wondering, yeah, the ragdoll craziness of this game is literally just as fun as it looks like it is. I think this is probably my 5th character I've tried out so far. I think there's like 20 or so in total. Midna is a little weird. I'm still getting used to her a little bit, but I do enjoy it. The only problem is that she's a little bit on the slower side when she's not sprinting. But her moveset and her combos are really fun, and there's still tons yet with her character I haven't begun to experiment with. But I really do like the base capture system. I think is really cool. The way that you either defend your bases or that you take them over is really fun. Now let's see. We gotta find that bomb chew real quick. And the cool thing too is that, like, the levels are just open enough for the enemies don't attack you just enough unprovoked that if you really need to, you can actually follow your cursor on your main screen a little bit back and forth and find out exactly where you're going without constantly bumping into walls or going wherever you need to go. Like, the actual, like, the chore of going from place to place in between your combat, it is a little bit relaxing. It does give you a little bit of time to kind of relax a little bit, but at the same point, it's not so long that you're ever, like, this is not the kind of game where you're gonna be like, where do I want to go? Like, where am I, what direction am I supposed to be heading? That's not supposed to be your question in a game like this. The trick is while not trying to desensitize yourself to the violence, but be able to actually keep the momentum of your fun play session as long as you can. And this game does a pretty good job at that. I have a lot of fun with the various kinds of enemies or the various waves of confrontation this game will throw your way. And even just looking at how cleanly the Legend of Zelda aesthetics translate into the Dynasty Warriors formula, you can tell how much hard work went into making this game feel so comfortable for both franchises. This is a really, really good example of how you do proper cross-franchise projects. Because you do have to, that's like your biggest thing, is that you have to make sure that neither franchise feels like they just got the shaft in comparison. And this isn't even like, this is still different than something like, say, like Marvel vs. Capcom or something like that. Because this isn't Dynasty Warriors versus Legend of Zelda. This is truly combining assets of both franchises. And I can clearly say, as I mentioned before, that there does feel like there is just as much Zelda in this game as there is Dynasty Warriors. And it's a good introduction to both franchises. Like, after playing this game, I would actually like to play Dynasty Warriors games. If I can track one down. Because if they're more like this, you know, I would totally give that a shot. I mean, even just the other day when we were talking about reboots and remakes, we were talking about like other franchises that would be nice to actually get, you know, what would be referred to as, quote unquote, the Dynasty Warriors formula. You know, the Dynasty Warriors treatment. Because this formula is actually like really acceptable to multiple franchises. You know, like if you look at the way that different companies or different kinds of games are more open to the way that people do licensed gaming. That, you know, the way you get good licensed games is not by this completely copying franchises, but you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel every single time either. Like, look at the way that people portrayed Shadow of Mordor, well, which I haven't gotten to play yet, but most often the people that like that game, the compliment they usually give it most often is they refer to it as the greatest Assassin's Creed game they've ever played. I mean, in a way, this is the way the licensed games were done back in their day also, back in the days of the NES era and all that, where they were most often copies of other franchises. But at the same time, most licensed games, not only are they made on small budgets, as many people know, and such small time constraints, but, I mean, they're usually not made by big video game people. So, I mean, if you're going to try to make something good, and you're already knowing that you're kind of not trying to reinvent the wheel, you're kind of going for a little bit more of a cash grabby kind of thing. If you know that you're not going to be completely devastated if you're not the most creative thing in the world, then why not be ashamed to, you know, borrow a few assets or, you know, or just be, you know, occasionally accused of being a clone of something. I mean, heck, one of the next games I'm going to cover in this franchise is a Smash Brothers clone of the Cartoon Network universe. Which is absolutely insane. Does it hold a candle to Smash Brothers? No, not in the slightest. That doesn't mean that it's not a game that's worth playing, and it doesn't mean that it's not a game that deserves to be good. Because that game is better than most Smash Brothers clones, or most fighting games of its kind. Partially because it has no... It doesn't get uppity about the fact that it's so much better than Smash Bros. It's not trying to be better than Smash Bros. They take the time away from trying to be the absolute be-all, end-all of creativity, and they actually use it to actually paying better homage to their characters and actually being able to get a roster that feels good and getting various things working for their game. I'm not saying that creativity is bad by any means, obviously, but creativity for the sake of creativity can sometimes be damning. Whatever you do, whether it's for creative means or for anything else, I mean, have a reason for it. Anything you do, anything at all, have a reason for it. And a really good example of that is the way that some people do licensed games. Is we've had a really good game for year for licensed games, actually, with games like Alien Isolation or the Walking Dead series having a second season, or Shadows of Mordor, like I mentioned a minute ago. Now, to be fair, a good advantage of these games is the fact that they are technically from different franchises, but at the same point, they are still taken as canonical connections to their series. You know, Shadows of Mordor is a Lord of the Rings game, yes, but it's based off of the overall Lord of the Rings universe, not off of a specific, not off of a specific movie. And that gives them less of a time constraint to work with, or mechanics that are less connected to. Now, in that style, I would like more of those kind of games to happen. More franchises like Terminator or RoboCop or, a lot of other high-action franchises. Not to make movie tie-ins, but to make from-scratch tie-ins of their universes. And it helps that most of them are from, are actually from people that are already connected to these kind of things. Like, Batman is already owned by Warner Brothers. Like the Arkham Asylum games were not based on the movies or the comic books or whatever. They were individual things of themselves. The Terminator franchise is also connected in that same route. Looney Tunes games or like anything. There's advantages to be taken with the fact that, a lot of these bigger franchises are part of other bigger franchises. I mean, that can get kind of dangerous after a while, but at the same point, you can have a lot of fun with, you know, the crossovers and the way that people own different properties. Or there's also a lot of really cool, there's a lot of advantage to be had with, it's almost like a shortcut to having the rights to you know, a video game franchise that's compatible, but also to be compatible, but also have access to the movie franchise you're working with. You know, there's no, you know, it's, if you already have a leg up on your competition and you already have those resources available to you, at least use that as a starting point. Use that as a way to free up so many more resources that you actually have money available and you actually have time available to get more creative on top of that. It's because of the fact that games like Shadow of Mordor or games like Alien Isolation use mechanics from other games in their franchises that lets them have the time to actually explore more concepts in their games, like the Nemesis system or the way that stealth mechanics are handled in Alien Isolation. Whew, that was a long-winded one, but yeah, I really like the way that Midna plays, and it is just, I'm not going to lie to you guys, it is just really fun to be doing this. I've wanted to Let's Play for a long time, and to finally be able to do this is literally, from audio problems and the like, this is my third Let's Play I have recorded in the last 4 hours, just trying to get something to work, and it looks like this one is finally going to work. So, thank you guys for stopping by our first episode of Deadmen Plays. If you like this video, please press the like button and the subscribe below. Go ahead and check out some of our other content on this site, different games we've played, and different projects going on at deadmeninc.com. Until next time, my name is Ken Johnson with Deadmen Inc. Plays. I'll see you next time.